Manually triggered rear curtain sync plus shutter drags. I should have said that this is a part 2 because we actually had a part 1 of this earlier with a 1-second shutter drag. And now we're gonna do a 20-second shutter drag. I think I said 30 seconds earlier. Forgive me. I thought it was 30, but it's actually 20. But it could be 30 if you'd like it to be. Okay, so for this shot, we have Yvette. We're back in our desert scene. We're hanging out, we're having a good time. I'm with Trevor, I'm with our entire production crew, and we're like, let's go get some nighttime shots. It'll be really fun, it'll be really cool. But it is absolutely pitch black. Now, hopefully, most of you have traveled a bit. You've been to the great outdoors, and you know that once you get away from the city, then you eliminate light pollution. That means that when it gets dark, like you can't see nothing. But the benefit of that is that you can see the stars. You see the stars, you see the moon and everything else. You know, if you have a bright enough sky, it can actually end up lighting your landscape and it looks absolutely incredible. Okay, so we're out in that kind of scene. We want to shoot to reveal the stars. So as far as composition and attributes, my main thought here is I'm gonna need to do a long butt shutter drag of at least 20 seconds, maybe 30 seconds with a wide open aperture at like ISO 1600 to be able to get enough light to have our stars be bright in the image, okay? I wanna have bright stars. I want it to look like daytime, but with stars in it. Exactly, just like that, okay? So I'm shooting on my Sigma 35mm art. This guy can go down to 1.4, but I have a hard time focusing him at 1.4, so I left it at 1.6. And my main attributes, my main compositional attributes for my camera settings is a long shutter, a 20-second shutter, a 30-second shutter, whatever it is that I end up needing here. So I know it's gonna be at least 15 seconds, okay? So I kind of run it to 15 seconds, or take a test shot, and then get to 20 seconds, have my ISO 1600. Those are the main things that I need for this shot. Okay, well, we know that sync is not gonna be an issue. We're shooting at 20 seconds long, so obviously we're below 1/200 of a second. We don't need no high-speed sync, and putting an ND filter on would be just ridiculous. Why would you do that in this kind of a scene? We need light, not cut it away. If you guys thought that I would use an ND filter here, then please go back and start this entire course over. I'm just kidding, don't do that. But with the ambient light exposure, we get to about the right exposure at 1600 ISO. We're right here. So 1600 ISO, we're at a 20-second shutter, we're at f1.6, and we're using 3000 degrees Kelvin or 2900 degrees Kelvin as our white balance, just so we have a really nice, crisp, and blue scene. What does that mean? That means that we're gonna need to probably gel our flash, okay? So just keep that in mind. If you're gonna go that cool of white balance, you either need to gel your flash or you need to be cool with it being very, very blue. So we just popped a little gel over this. Now, it wasn't like it was gelled to any, you know, I mean, this is a bulbous thingy right here. So I think I just grabbed a gel and like stuck it over the, I had a little modifier that just opened it up a little bit. I stuck a gel over that. Didn't even cover it completely, but at least it was better than being 5500 degrees Kelvin. Okay, so what do we need to do for this shot? Well, the first thing is that if we're gonna run a 20-second exposure, if we're gonna run a 1-second exposure, we need to be on a tripod, right? So we have the camera set up on a tripod. How the heck am I gonna trigger rear curtain sync? Because let's get back to that sync issue. Obviously, we're not gonna have shutter speed issues as far as that goes, but what about rear curtain sync versus first curtain sync? In this kind of a scene, if the flash pops right at the beginning of the shot, then any motion afterwards is gonna basically burn in over the flash, and you're gonna end up with an image that looks very ghosty. It's not gonna be sharp. Our subject here is not gonna be sharp. So the way that we pull this off and the way that we do this in camera, this is done in camera, this is not done in Photoshop. The way that we do this in camera is by popping rear curtain sync manually. If I would have had my Photix Metros, and I think we did have the Photixes out there, but we just so happen to have the Bolt VB22 set up already on a softbox that Trevor brought. He brought this, it's called the SMDV Speedbox 60. It's actually a perfect fit for the Bolt, and we had that set up, and I had my Pocket Wizard on the camera, so we just walked out there. I wasn't thinking I was gonna do, I don't know, I should have been thinking, because then I would have just popped the Photixes on and we've been good. Nighttime scenes like this, you don't need that kind of wattage. We're running this thing at like 1/32 to 1/64 power. We don't need that. We just need a pocket strobe. That's why I wrote over here, your pocket strobe gearless, because we don't need anything that big. But I had this, so I'm gonna make it work. And that's, you know, honestly, for the sake of this tutorial, it's kind of better that way anyway, because I can show you what to do in these kind of situations when your gear is not necessarily what you want it to be. So how do we fire this rear curtain sync? Well, just like before, when we shot that couples photography session, right? When we're in downtown and we did a 1 second shutter drag, we just popped that radio trigger. In that case, we were using the Newers, but this case we have a Pocket Wizard. So we just pop it off. And then all I'm gonna do in this case, in the last tutorial, you know, we're running a 1 second shutter. So we didn't really need to do much in terms of like estimation because it was just pop and then fire, pop and then fire. This time, it's gonna be hard for me to count to 20 seconds and to get this accurate. So what do? I bust out my phone. You have an iPhone, whatever phone, Android phone. All you need to do is bring up your timer, okay? You just go to your timer right here. And it was kind of funny the way we were doing this, but anyway. Okay, so I go to the stopwatch and then all I do is when I fire the shutter, I just press start, okay? So as soon as I press the shutter, I press start and then I just let this count up. Now, in a 20-second long shutter, make sure that this isn't pointing anywhere towards the scene because if it is, it's gonna actually bleed into the scene and you will notice it over 20 seconds. So once this gets up high enough, like 18, I start counting down, 19, pop. And then we fire the Pocket Wizard at 19 seconds, okay? Or 19 and a half, or however risky you wanna take it, up to 20 seconds. But generally, that's gonna give you a good enough manual rear curtain sync to get your subject sharp. Now you're gonna have to do it a few times. I'll be honest, you will have to do it a few times. And be aware that any bit of light that is coming off of, you know, any objects, whether it be phones or whatever, is gonna affect the scene. It was funny, we were shooting another scene that was similar to this one. We have another shot where Yvette was closer to the camera, she was walking up to it, and we had this bit of red in the scene. And we're like, what the heck is causing that red? And we found out that it was Trevor's, I think it was his camera, was it was blinking a red, the autofocus thing, or whatever it was. It was like a timer that was blinking red. It was ever so small, it was this big, it was an LED that was this big, but over 20 seconds, it actually caused the scene to be pretty red. So it becomes very, very noticeable. There's flies in here. What the heck? All right, so now that our flies or our gnats have left us, let's get back to this. So with the light direction and quality, we have it inside of that speed box, which is very, very similar to a Westcott Rapid box. Only thing is that it's a little bit more ideal for, say, a bolt, that bearable, because you can fit it all the way inside of there. And that's why we're using it when we're using this guy. But other than that, we just place the light direction off to the left side of the frame. And you know what? It doesn't even have to be like we're shooting so far in this kind of a shot that I'm not really worried about light quality. I just need something to freeze her in place. That's it. I have her standing at the top of this hill because I thought this might be kind of like a fun, like artistic shot where she has her hands up and it's kind of like pointing up to the sky and just kind of looking at the sky. It's really just more of a shot about the sky in this kind of an image. But we did this and we also did a more close-up version where we had a couple different lights, which we might show you in lighting 301 because we actually set up backlights on that. But anyway, so lights off to camera left and you can see a little bit of that bleed there hitting the ground, okay? So you can do two things. You can feather it up or you can take one shot with the light and one shot without the light. We had to do that anyway for the purpose of the tutorial. We want to show you the difference between the two shots. So all I did in post was I just layered the two images in Photoshop and I just removed, basically, I just put this background over this one. Very simple, just masked it out and replaced it so that way we didn't have any light bleed over that. And we just had her kind of lit up in the background. Look nice. Another thing you can do in Photoshop is like kind of add the shape back to the dress. The dress was hanging like very flat and very, I don't know. You can add that shape back by a little bit of liquefying and whatnot if you'd like in Photoshop. But otherwise, I mean, this is straight out of camera. And what you want to do with these types of shots is make sure that you are slowing things down. I mean, obviously you're slowing the shutter down. I'm not talking about the shutter speed, but slowing your shooting down to really zoom in and analyze, because you might need to do a couple of these shots before you get the results that you want. It takes a little bit of practice to get this kind of a shot, and you need to tell your subject that during this time, during that duration, I want you to hold flawlessly still. Hold your breath and count down so that your subject knows that, you know, when to start and when to stop. Obviously, if you're like, okay, go ahead, and then she's holding her breath, and then you get the shot and you're like looking at the back of your camera and you're like, this is so awesome, my shot's so cool, this is fantastic, oh my gosh, that looks amazing. And you forgot to tell her to relax, and then all of a sudden you hear this boom, because she just passed out, because she's been holding her breath for a minute, and you forgot to tell her. Okay, so that's an exaggeration, but seriously, let them know when you're starting and when you're stopping. One, you want them to be able to hold flawlessly still while the shutter is open, and two, you want to let them relax between shots, because it's not that easy to hold that perfectly still. Okay, so that's it for manually triggered rear curtain sync plus shutter drags. So what are the key tips here? Remember, number one, get the camera up onto a tripod. We had our MePhoto Globetrotter that we stuck this on. And then number two, when it comes to focusing, use your live view and zoom in. It's very simple. What I'll do is I'll use my live view, I'll zoom in, I'll manually adjust my focus and then lock the focus to manual so it's not gonna change whenever I press down the shutter button. Okay, next, take the flash or take the radio off of the camera. And then what you're gonna do is when you press, so number three is when you press the shutter release, you're gonna also press the timer on your phone. So start that timer and then follow the timer. So number four, when that timer reaches the end of the shutter, you're gonna manually trigger your Pocket Wizard. 5, make sure that you look at the image, zoom in close, make sure that everything is good. Make sure you've told your subject to hold perfectly still and look for ghosting. Look to make sure that your light direction, your light quality matches your scene, that you don't have any weird shadows, weird highlights, and so forth. 6, if you do have those things, then repeat steps 1 through 5. Hopefully you enjoyed this tutorial. Let's head on to the next video now.